Hi there. This is Tim Freund. Thanks for tuning in to the Real Estate Conversation. I do greatly appreciate your time, and I hope I bring some value to you. Today is a continuation on our first-time buyer podcast, bringing to light some of the different factors that you need to know as a first-time buyer. We've talked in the past about saving money. We've talked about financing. If you've listened to any of the previous versions, you're aware of that. We talked last time about realtors, the importance of the realtor in the process. Today, I actually want to talk about the offer itself. So just fast forwarding. Okay, you found a place, you found your realtor, you found a place, you're going to write an offer. Now, I'm not going to talk about specifically too much about negotiating. That's another podcast down the road. But about the offer. So the first thing is, what is the offer? What is an offer? Okay, you're making an offer to purchase a piece of real estate. You're going to be financing that offer. So the first thing you need to know is you're negotiating the price, but you're also going to be negotiating the terms. Now, before I get into terms, which are oftentimes more important than the price, I want to get this point across to you really clear. I mean, if you take nothing away from this podcast, take this. Don't lose your home over small money. What is small money? When you're talking about a piece of real estate that's 2, 5, 8, 9, $1 million, touchdown, don't lose the house over $5,000 or $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. If you want this house, that additional payment, that extra, $100, $20, $60 a month, you will forget about that money the moment you're in your home. The moment you make the first payment, you're not going to go, oh man, I sure wish I didn't have to write that extra $75 check for this home. No, you're going to be in your home. You're financing it. It's not that big a deal. It's a dinner out. You're not going to miss it. Don't lose your home over small money. Now, the reason I emphasize that is because when you're negotiating with a seller, to them, that extra $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, that is money in their pocket. That's cash. That's serious cash. And yes, it's equally cash to you in principle, but not really, because you're financing it over 30 years at some ridiculously low interest rate, and it's not a lot of money. So don't lose it over small money. The seller's going to want that extra cash. If you need to, give it to them. Get the house. That's the big picture. Okay, enough. I've harped. All right. So now we're negotiating the price. We've negotiated the price. We come to an agreement on price, but there's more to price. In fact, as I mentioned, terms are often more important than price. For example, let's say you're negotiating with a seller, and that seller needs a longer escrow because they've been in their home for a really long time. Maybe they're elderly. Maybe they just had a baby. Maybe they're disabled. Maybe they don't know where they're going. That's a real problem in today's market. Where the heck am I going to go? There's nothing out there for me to buy. They need a little bit more time to locate a property, a replacement property. So you may be able to actually leverage the fact that they need time in exchange for money. You may be able to get a lower price if you give them a 60-day escrow or a 45-day escrow. You may be able to get the patio set thrown in if you give them that extra escrow. Maybe you want the refrigerator and the washer dryer, and you're going to ask for that. But in exchange, you're going to give them a longer escrow. Maybe they need a rent back. At your cost of ownership, of course. You're not going to pay the mortgage and not, have the rent be the same money unless it's really a competitive environment. But maybe you agree to let them stay you're in an apartment or you're in rented a condo or wherever you're at, and you don't need to be outright that second. Maybe they need an extra 30 days because they need to find a property. So they're going to pay your mortgage and your taxes and your insurance, HOA if applicable, and they're going to rent the place back for 30 days. And in exchange, you're going to get a better price. So these are things in terms that you may be negotiating. So terms can be very important to getting you a better price. But sometimes it's not about their length of time. Sometimes it's what you want. Well, I really want the pool table. I really want the the drill press in the garage. I really want that refrigerator and washer and dryer because I really don't want to have to go shell out additional cash, to go buy a refrigerator and washer and dryer. And you have a newer one, and it matches. I'd like to have yours. So those are terms you're going to negotiate. So when we look at an offer, we're negotiating price and terms. When are we going to close? We talked about that. Maybe it's 30 days, maybe it's 45 days, maybe it's 60 days. How much are you putting down? That's something that goes into the offer. Is it important when a seller is looking at your offer to see that you have a sizable down payment when they're maybe looking at more than one offer at the same time? Yep, sure is. How many times have you heard, I lost out to a cash buyer? Maybe the cash buyer didn't even offer as much money, but it was cash, and they're like, heck with it. I don't want to deal with, somebody's financing and appraisal and whatever. So those are important things. How much you're putting down? What's included, right? The washer, dryer, the fridge, the light fixtures, the TV on the wall, right? These are all things that maybe they're important that they're included. What's the seller going to pay for? Who's paying for escrow? Who's paying for title? Who's paying for the home protection plan? Are they doing any retrofitting? Do you care? I mean, if you don't care because you're a contractor or you're a handy guy, maybe when it comes time to do the repairs down the road, you're not going to care about that. You'll take the house as is. You'll fix it yourself. So who's going to pay for escrow? Typically, escrow is a split fee. Remember, if you listened to earlier in the process, one of our earlier podcasts, escrow is the neutral third party in the process. They're the hub of the wheel that everything kind of runs through. So the loan runs through, the down payment runs through, the financing, the actual earnest money deposit, who's paying for the home warranty plan runs through there. Who's paying the commissions, right? I mean, typically the seller is paying the commissions, but that all runs through escrow. So who's going to pay for escrow? Well, typically in California, escrow is split 50-50. So each side pays the same. Who pays for title? Well, if you're paying cash for a property, the only title policy is the owner's policy, and that's typically paid for by the seller. Right? It might be a couple $1,000. Depends. It might be several thousand. It depends on the price of the home. But if it's a competitive environment, maybe you buy your own title policy and you pay for it yourself. I'll pay the $2,000. Give me the house. Whatever. That's an example. So those are things. What about your protective elements in the contract, like your contingencies? What are contingencies? Contingencies are basically, in the California contract, it's you're out. How do you get out of the deal if you want to get out of the deal and you're the buyer? And how long is that for? So you may be negotiating contingencies like, okay, it's a competitive situation. There's a bunch of people out there. I'm gonna fix a bunch of stuff in my house anyway. I don't care if the oven isn't working right. I just need to know what's working, and I'll make the decision at that time if I'm going to move forward. But you may say, I'll do all my inspections and investigations in 10 days, 7 days, fast. Because if you find something and you don't like it, you might as well get out of there as soon as possible, right? And for the seller, that's a big incentive to them. That's, if you find something, I don't want to wait around weeks while you're, messing around with investigating this and investigating that. Well, then you say, but wait a minute, what if I shorten that up? Can I really do a thorough job if I don't have as much time? Answer, possibly yes. Yeah. Always? No. No. What happens if I need more time? And I got the contract accepted at 7 days or 10 days to do all my investigations? I need more time. I'm going to ask for an extension of time. Now, maybe the seller grants, maybe they don't, but you're already in escrow at that point. So you should be able to get things done in 10 days. But listen, you find something, you got to have a sewer inspection, you need a structural inspection, you can't get an inspector out there in time or an engineer out there to look at it. Guess what? You're asking for an extension of time. So those are called terms. Those are terms that you're negotiating, and sometimes they're renegotiated during the process. What about loan, contingencies? Well, it's pretty hard to shorten the loan contingency, and the same for the appraisal. I mean, you might be able to shorten the appraisal contingency, but in the California Association contract, there are 3 important contingencies that you're negotiating when you make your offer and you include in your offer. One is what I just described, your investigation contingency. If I find something and I don't like it, I can get out of the deal without penalty. Yes, you can in California. Yes, you can. That time is defaulted on the contract at 17 days, and I just gave you reasons why you might want to shorten them because you can get it done. It gives the seller a little spiff that doesn't really cost you anything because you can get it done. And in worst case scenario, if you need an extension, you're going to ask for it because you already got the house and you're in escrow. You have a contingency on appraisal. What's that? Well, the lender's going to insist on an appraisal. Why? Because the lender's going to take that loan and they're going to sell it. Practically the minute after you close escrow, they're going to find a buyer for that loan. Maybe they package it with a bunch of them. Maybe it's a Freddie Fannie loan, whatever. They're going to get rid of that loan. Maybe they're going to collect the payment every month and get paid to collect the payment every month, but they're not going to actually hold that loan. They want that money back so they can lend it to somebody else. So to do that, they need to have an appraisal that supports the value of the property. I'm selling this loan from Bank of America, and I'm going to sell this loan to Prudential Life Insurance, along with 20 other loans. Life insurance company's going to look at that loan. They're going to, wait a minute. You have a security. This house is the security, securitizing the loan, right? It's the asset that secures the loan. But you say here that it's worth $500, but the appraisal says it's only worth $480. Okay, that's a problem, right? So the lender's going to require an appraisal because they're going to sell that loan, and their buyers of that loan is going to need that appraisal. And so you have a contingency because if it doesn't appraise, guess what? The bank's going to want you to pay the difference. Someone has to pay the difference, or there's no loan. So you have a contingency on appraisal. So what happens? How long does that take? Well, the appraisal typically is going to take, a couple weeks to, the default on the contract, 17 days, and it oftentimes takes all of that to get the appraisal back from the appraiser. Can't be issued for a while. It can be ordered for a while, and then it takes him a while to get out to the home, and then he's got to assemble all the data, and he's got to write up the report, and he's got to send the report to the lender, and then the lender's got to review it, and then they got to send it for supplemental review, and all this kind of, it takes time it takes. But you have a contingency in place because you may not want to buy that home if the appraisal doesn't make value. And you have a contingency in place. It's in the contract. I have a contingency. 17 days to get an appraisal. And if it doesn't appraise, I can quit. I can bail. No penalties. What happens if it doesn't make value? Are you going to have to bail? No, not if you can either A, come up with the difference, B, have the seller come down in price to the appraised value, C, strike somewhere in the middle. I'll come up 10, you come down 10, we'll make a deal. Or D, yeah, you know what? I'm out of here. Didn't appraise, I'm out of there. So you have that contingency in place. And by the way, is the appraisal telling you what the home is worth? No. The appraiser does not work for you. The appraiser works for the lender, even though you're paying for it. The appraisal is for the lender to sell the loan with the asset securing the loan, and that appraisal supports that value. It doesn't say what the house is worth. All the appraiser can do is look at backward data. What did a similar home sell for 2 months ago? What did a similar home sell for 3 months ago? Well, if it's an accelerating market, it's appreciating market, I'm not going to be able to get at what somebody paid for it 3 months ago. I got to pay more. But if it doesn't appraise, what are you going to do? Well, maybe you come up with that extra money. But you have a contingency and you can quit. Why would you not want to quit? Well, how about this for an answer? Because the value of the property is what a seller and a buyer agree the value is. It's not what the appraiser says. He's just one guy. It's just one opinion. What's important is what is that property worth to you? If you can't find another property someplace else of equal value at that price, to you, it's worth that price. You just agreed to pay that price. The fact that the appraiser says it's not worth that is really irrelevant to you. Where it's relevant is, can I still get financing? And as long as I can get financing because I can come up with additional cash, then I can make the deal. But I do have the contingency in place. If I don't have the cash and I can't make the deal, I can get out. Loan contingency. What happens? You get to the end and you can't get a loan. This just happened. I have a house in escrow, $4 million house, $4.1 million house. Buyer's getting a $2.5 million loan. All of a sudden, COVID-19 comes along, and all of the banks say, geez, we better hold on to our cash. We don't want to make such a big dollar loan. We got nobody to sell it to. Prudential isn't buying now. They want to hold on to their money. Everybody's holding on to their money. Nobody wants to buy this loan. I don't want it on my books. I got to be able to lend. I'd rather do, instead of a $2.5 million loan, I'd rather do $500,000 loans. I can sell those all day long to Freddie and Fannie. What happened? The money disappeared. There was no financing available. Could the buyer get out of the deal in that scenario? Well, of course. They can't get a loan. It doesn't exist in that particular story, in that scenario. That's a real story, by the way. Can't get a loan. Do they have to quit? No. They can waive their contingency and then lose their deposit, but they have a contingency on loan. Again, this is a term. How long is that contingency? The default in California's contract is 21 days. What if it takes longer? I don't have an approval at 21 days. What are you going to do? You're going to ask for an extension. Seller going to grant that extension? Maybe, maybe not. Negotiable. Okay? But you have that contingency. So you can get out of the deal if something comes up in the investigation that you don't like and you can't come to an accommodation with the seller. The air conditioning doesn't work. You said the air conditioning worked, Mr. Seller. Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Buyer. It doesn't. You're just going to have to take it as is because every home in California is sold as is. And by the way, that's true. Every home is sold as is. The question is, though, does the seller want to sell his home? Because he's going to have to sell it without air conditioning to the next guy, or is he going to be willing to make a deal with you? All right, listen, I'll give you $3,000 so you can buy a new air conditioner. I'll give you $10,000 so you can go get a new HVAC system. Maybe they do that. Don't count on it, but maybe they do that. That is a negotiation that could take place. But you have a contingency in the event that turns up, he's not willing to pay for it, and you want to get the heck out of Dodge because you know what? Now you feel like I'm paying too much money, or I'm just not going to have the money to do it, and I can't live in Woodland Hills without air conditioning. It's freaking 120 degrees in September. So you have these contingencies built in. These are terms that are negotiable in the contract. You get through the process, and we've negotiated all these different things, and now you're going to. We're moving to close, right? Now we get to the point where we got our investigation. We came to terms. We got the appraisal, and we made value. That worked out great. We got our loan approval, and the lender drew loan docs. The loan docs were delivered to escrow. Escrow told me to wire in my down payment, which I did. I'm now going to go down to escrow and sign loan documents. That's right. Sign loan documents. Sign your loan documents. You're committing to borrowing this money and to paying it back. You've given them their down payment. The bank puts the balance of the loan, that balance of the purchase amount beyond your down payment, into escrow. And then you're going to close escrow and you're going to take possession and you get the keys. In California, you do get a walkthrough. You're guaranteed to get a walkthrough within 5 days of closing. However, that is not a contingency. It's not a contingency, which, by the way, does sometimes make for some interesting conversations. I had a house that I sold a number of years ago where when the seller moved out, we'd already, we were closing that day. The seller moved out the day of close, so we're not obligated to be out. We did the walkthrough. The house looked great. Seller moves out, moves the pot away from the dining room table, the big palm, and the wood is damaged under the pot. Yikes. Yeah, that's a problem. And, we're already closing. Can't stop it. It's happening that day. You just discovered it. Could that be a situation where we go to mediation or arbitration or maybe even a lawsuit? Yeah, sure could be. Usually what happens is the agents get together and they talk to the seller, they talk to the buyer, and we figure something out. So those are things that happens. And then you finish your walkthrough and you get handed the keys and your openers, and you move, and it's wonderful, and you get to enjoy your home, and it's awesome. It's great. Your sanctuary is a great place, especially in time of things like shelter in place and working from home that we've had to experience here in 2020. So that's it. I mean, that's kind of in a nutshell what happens when you write an offer. It's a big process. You want to have your realtor on your side. You want to have some basic knowledge about what's going on in the terms in that contract. How do I get out of it? And by the way, if you've lifted your contingencies and you change your mind, you can cancel. You can walk away, but you'll lose your deposit. So that's the thing about the contingencies in this process that's so key. And the courts have ruled in California that a buyer cannot be forced to buy something they don't want to buy. Stock market crashes 10,000 points. Well, I'm not buying the house because the economy's going to hell in a handbasket. You don't have to. Courts say so. Doesn't mean there aren't damages. Doesn't mean the liquidated damages clause doesn't kick in. By the way, California, that's 3% of the purchase price. If you're talking about a $200,000 home, that's $6,000. That's not small potatoes. You're talking about $1 million home, that's $30,000. That's a lot of money. So you can always walk away, but there could be penalties. Conversely, the seller decides, I can't find a house I want to buy. I'm going to cancel the transaction. You know what? Those kids can go to, some other place and move because I'm not selling them my home. Court said they can't do that. That's right. Courts have ruled that a seller can be compelled. Once a seller commits to selling a home, they can't get out of that transaction unless the buyer doesn't perform and the seller notifies the buyer that they haven't performed and says, if you don't perform in X number of days, I'm going to cancel you. In that scenario, a seller can unilaterally cancel, but they can't cancel just because they change their mind for any reason. Now, there are some exceptions with things like COVID where there have been a few interpretations on some rules and things where, acts of God and whatnot have stepped in, and there have been some cases and examples where there's exceptions. But the general rule is a seller can be forced to close. Buyer cannot be forced to close. Buyer can walk away. They just will lose their deposit. Anyway, that is a whirlwind snapshot of what an offer is and writing an offer and what's involved with that. You can reach me at therealestateconversation.com or at my website, thousandoaksrealestate.com. That's 1000oaksrealestate.com. You can find me on social, Instagram. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can DM me. You can text me. You can send up smoke signals. I'm bound to see them. Love to help you. I work on referral, a large part. I sell houses. I would love to work with you or somebody that you care about that needs proper representation. Find me on the web. Thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate you tuning in to our talk today. I hope you're getting a lot out of it. I enjoyed doing it, and I will speak to you guys really soon. Thanks a lot.